harm, it would be taking the steps advocated by the Commission.
I listened earlier to the remarks of the Minister in the Chair about the discussion in the Select Committee concerning the way in which votes were likely to occur on this issue, and I'm not sure that we share a recollection of the way in which that discussion proceeded. That's probably the fairest way to put it. In saying that, I'll repeat what I've said on earlier occasions, that I pay tribute to the way in which the Minister, then the member, did chair the committee. It was a courteous exercise in which all submitters were heard, I think, carefully. But I think it is important that we not make assumptions on the basis of discussions in the committee as to how the Committee of the Whole House ought to act. And I certainly repeat my earlier plea to National Party members to think about these supplementary order papers on their merits. The evidence, as I said at the Select Committee, was overwhelming from all players other than those directly representing the industry. There was a real desire to see controls around the advertising, the pricing and the availability of alcohol. And what I want to do, sir, if I may, is just take the Committee of the Whole House through what we know as the government's response or advice to advice that it's received from officials concerning each of these supplementary order papers, and discuss that advice, starting with what I think is the excellent and far-sighted supplementary order paper from the Māori Party member Te Oroa Flavel. Now, the first thing that his supplementary order paper would do would be to bring in a prohibition of advertising of alcohol products and alcohol sponsorship, and introduce an offence for breaching advertising and sponsorship restrictions. The officials, and we know this because the Minister circulated this advice to every Member of Parliament, gave the following advice: that part of the supplementary order paper not be supported. The advice conceded that there was strong public support for a complete ban, but little research regarding effectiveness. Some evidence suggests a complete ban could have a modest effect on drinking by young people. Well, I would say particularly to those members who were emphatic in their support for either a split purchase age or a uniform age of 20, even a modest decrease in youth drinking, surely, in your view, members, would be a good thing. And I would ask that on the basis of the official advice, that those of you who did vote for other than a uniform age of 18 look again at the supplementary order paper. Even the advice received from officials indicates that it would go some way to achieving the aims that you were so keen to see at an earlier stage of this debate. Now, there is also some concern expressed around transitional funding, the same sorts of concerns that were expressed at the time that the Health Sponsorship Council had to look at replacement advertising and funding for tobacco. But that was something that this Parliament showed it had the ability to deal with and overcome. I'm confident that we'd be able to rise to the same challenge on this occasion if there were a will from the Government and the Minister of Finance to look carefully at this issue. And finally, there's the response that the Government's already agreed to establish an expert forum to consider further restrictions on alcohol advertising and sponsorship to reduce alcohol-related harm. There's the advice that the forum will be set up once the bill's passed and is due to report back to the Ministers of Justice and Health within a year. Well, the question has to be, sir, on that point, how long do we want to wait? We've got the opportunity now to legislate and to deal with these problems. Why would we kick something off to yet another so-called expert committee when, as the previous speaker noted, there is actually sufficient evidence before the House for us to act now? So the second part of the supplementary order paper is the one that would establish a sinking lid on off-licence premises where 85% of the annual sales revenue is expected to come from alcohol sales, unless the premise is replacing another identical or larger premise in the same territorial authority, termed a relocation, and the premise is not located within a 5-kilometre radius of any, Mr Chairman, of any existing bottle stores. Now, the advice here concedes that there's a definite link between outlet density and alcohol-related harm, and notes that reducing density would therefore reduce alcohol-related harm. Again, a good reason to look at this supplementary order paper on its merits. The advice goes on to note that local alcohol policies, something that we'll deal with in a later part, Sir, can limit the density of licences without contravening certain other considerations that are mentioned in the advice.
That's part 3.
I'm aware of that, Sir, but I'm dealing with the official's advice on this supplementary order paper, and one of the components of the advice is that it should not be supported because the LAPs, which we deal with in a later part, deal with the issue. So I would appreciate it, sir, if you just let me complete the point. Well, the problem, of course, with that part of the advice is that the local alcohol policies, which we'll come to deal with later, are not mandatory. So they might well provide a mechanism to deal with the explosion of liquor outlets that we've seen since 1989. The trouble is many local authorities simply won't operate them because they're not required to, at least in terms of the legislation as it stands. Then Te Aroha Flavel's supplementary order paper would add a power to the bill to introduce a minimum price per unit of alcohol sold on licensed premises and introduce an offence for sale of alcohol at below minimum price. Basically, the advisers say to the Minister and thence to MPs, well, that's premature because the government's already investigated a minimum pricing regime for alcohol.
That is definitely part 3.
Sir, I'm aware of that, but as I said, what I'm doing, with respect, is running through the advice that the Minister has published to members of Parliament from the officials as to why this supplementary order paper should be opposed. So what I'm inviting members to do is look at that advice and consider why it should not be taken on board.
Well, we've got, in all respects to the member, we have 3 amendments under this new part 2 and new part 7, and that's really where I asked the member to come back to, tie in what you're saying, but we're really concentrating on those because what you're saying is fine, but all that should be covered in part 3. So, Charles Cheval.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. The next part of the supplementary order paper would change the national minimum trading hours to 10 a.m. to 3 a.m, with a compulsory one-way door from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m, for premises for on-licence and club licences, and 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. for off-licences. Now again, the advice that is received, this is in Te Aroha Flavel's supplementary order paper 81, sir.
Yeah, I understand that it's in his, but what we're doing is specifically referring, what you're saying is correct, it's in the SOP, but we're not dealing with that part which is in part 3.
I beg your pardon, sir.
We're only dealing with what's in new part 2A and new part 7. So
in that case, sir, what I'll do is I'll move to the other 2 excellent supplementary order papers that are before the committee in this part of the debate, that of Ian Lees-Galloway and that of Dr David Clark. And, sir, the supplementary order paper 91 would insert a new part 2A banning billboard and poster advertising within 300 metres of schools and early childhood centres, create a 9 p.m. watershed for alcohol advertising on TV, and ban alcohol advertising in cinemas and public screenings for all films that are not rated R18. The advice, again, is, well, don't support that because there's this expert forum that's going to be convened and it's premature to move in that area. Again, I would simply say, sir, what I said in respect of the earlier part and the earlier supplementary order paper. We have the evidence about the harm. We need not wait. This is the opportunity to legislate and we should proceed. So finally, the supplementary order paper from my colleague Dr David Clark, supplementary order paper number 81, no, I'm sorry, number 115. And sir, that would add restrictions on the advertising of alcohol on television and also on radio. Now again, the officials say there's strong public support for a complete ban, but little research regarding effectiveness. Some evidence suggests a complete ban could have a modest effect on drinking by young people. So the same point arises in respect of the first part of Te Aroha Flavel's supplementary order paper. If we can, as the officials concede, have some effect on drinking, particularly by young people, irresponsible drinking, we ought to take it. This is the opportunity that we have. There is no benefit in further delay. We've heard the strong public urging that we ought to legislate more strongly in these areas. Here is an example of strong legislation that could make a real difference. And then there's the chestnut around the expert forum. Well, sir, again, I think that's been comprehensively dealt with in the debate. These are 3 excellent supplementary order papers. They do tighten up on advertising and on availability, and they do deserve careful consideration and certainly, in my view, support by the committee.
Call Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to take a call on